Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Tracy Alexander. And coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli government continues to play the coronavirus accordion as the cabinet weighs even further restrictions to clamp down on spiralling infection rates. Threats of another intifada make their way to the west, with pro-Palestinian and Black Lives Matter protesters calling to tear down the United States and Israel. And who says training is just for man's best friend? Stay tuned to learn how our feline friends are just, if not more, capable than canines. A host of COVID-19 restrictions will be reintroduced in Israel as infection rates spiral into worrying territory. The so-called coronavirus cabinet convening today to discuss restrictions to restaurants and bars. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying the numbers of infections are higher in the second wave than at the peak of the first. The push to get a handle on the feverishly spreading virus comes after a deathly Sabbath. Here's more. I too am in isolation. That's Israel's Public Security Minister Amir Ohana, taking to Facebook to announce his entrance into quarantine after the head of the border police, Nitzav Shabtai, tested positive for coronavirus. Israel seeing daily infection numbers surge beyond 1,000 just over the Sabbath, bringing the total number beyond 29,300, plus 4 new deaths just on Saturday, bringing the total fatalities to 330. Ohana, who oversees the police, saying starting Sunday, thousands of officers will only deal with the enforcement of the novel virus. Today we are at a crossroads, he says, warning that the virus will spread out of control, prompting full closures and tremendous damage to the economy. Or, he says, we take responsibility for our lives. Ohana referring to the new restrictions to event halls and public gatherings. Indoor events will be limited to 50 people, down from 250, and social gatherings will be limited to 20. President Reuven Rivlin, Defence Minister Benny Gantz, and IDF Chief of Staff Aviv Kochavi will not need to enter quarantine despite attending the Thursday ceremony at Jerusalem's Mount Herzl, commemorating 6 years since Operation Protective Edge, in which Shabtai was in attendance. The Health Ministry's guidelines say that isolation is needed if you've been within 2 metres of an infected person for 15 minutes or more. The ministry Saturday saying an epidemiological investigation ruled out the need for the top officials to isolate. Despite Ohana's negative result, he says he's choosing to quarantine just to be on the safe side. Meantime, scuffles breaking out between protesters and police in Jerusalem's Ma'ale Adumim, with officers attempting to enforce mask wearing in the ultra-Orthodox neighbourhood. 2 people were arrested after fighting erupted when police went to write a ticket for a woman refusing to put on her mask. $58 or 200 shekel fines is the current penalty for not wearing the protective face covering, with lawmakers looking to raise the charge to 500 shekels or $145. And in Palestinian areas, 12 deaths have been reported since the start of the pandemic, most of those taking place in the past 2 weeks. Infection rates are climbing in the cities of Hebron and Bethlehem. The Palestinian Authority Health Ministry reporting some 528 new infections over Saturday and enforcing a 5-day lockdown across the West Bank Friday. And as police take to the streets in droves to crack down on the spread of COVID-19, international spokesperson for Israel's police, Mickey Rosenfeld, joins us with an update on the phone. Mickey, thank you for being with us. Now, the public is very concerned, for one, about public transport. So what are police doing to ensure appropriate hygiene measures are being adhered to on buses and trains?
Well, as of this morning, the Israeli National Police have increased patrols and activities also on public transport, and that includes both buses as well as railways that are traveling from different spots around the country. The main emphasis is to make sure that the public are wearing masks, are keeping social distancing as much as possible. And unfortunately, we've seen a tremendous increase in the numbers per day over the last 48 hours. So a strategic decision has been made by the Israeli National Police that an increase in activities and operations are taking place in all public areas.
And Mickey, what do people need to know about rules pertaining to bars and restaurants then?
Well, as of now, in terms of the numbers, we're talking about the laws and regulations which are allowing up to 100 people to be in areas of bars and restaurants, keeping the specific distances which are tremendously important. At the moment, there are no changes in the laws of gatherings at weddings, etc. But as the situation develops, and we can see that it's an ongoing situation, and no doubt there will be changes in the laws and regulations, we will continue to implement activities.
And Mickey, then how are police ensuring that people returning from abroad or who have been ordered into quarantine are actually staying in isolation?
Over the weekend, for example, police visited 130 different homes where we know that people are in isolation. That is part of the ongoing activity, gathering the information from the Ministry of Health, from the borders when people are coming back. And of course, we're looking into the numbers, the passports, and making sure that everyone, both Israelis as well as foreigners that are arriving in Israel, are keeping to the 14-day isolation, which is also very important as part of the ongoing and overall efforts to prevent the spread of the coronavirus.
All right, Mickey Rosenfeld, thank you so much for that insight. As if coronavirus wasn't giving Israel enough of a hard time, it seems the government is at risk of collapse, this time over failure to pass the annual budget. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been threatening to call early elections if no budget is passed this week. He and his supporters want to see an annual plan, but alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz is dragging his heels. His Blue and White Party, plus several supporters from the Likud, want to see a biannual budget. Now, Gantz is pushing back against Netanyahu's threats, telling Army Radio this morning that early elections would be irresponsible and very bad for Israel, saying he joined a cabinet in order to prevent a fourth election. But the entire Knesset could be forced to disband if the 2021 budget doesn't pass. And the latest poll numbers out last month showed Netanyahu would be able to form a coalition without the centrist Blue and White Party if elections were held now. From Gaza to Minnesota, globalise the intifada. These terrifying calls are coming from the streets of Brooklyn. A pro-Palestinian, pro-Black Lives Matter demonstration chanting death to Israel in a so-called day of rage, hijacking the term used by Palestinian protesters, as Aaron Porras reports.
The DPRK also refuses to recognize Israel and calls it an imperialist satellite of the UN.
In a fearsome scene, video published this weekend by Memory, or the Middle East Media Research Institute, showed images not from the streets of Tehran, but from Brooklyn, New York, as angry marchers called for the United States and Israel to be wiped off the face of the earth. Several speakers co-opting the Black Lives Matter movement's inertia, repeating anti-Semitic canards, like how Israel controls the West and how the Jews are colonialist Europeans, while spearheading calls for violence against police and the American public.
The police that are around us are not our friends. You should not speak to them. They are our enemy. They are an impediment to liberation of Palestine. When I saw that precinct burn, I thought I was closer to Palestine. When I see an NYPD cop car burn, I say we're waking up revolutionary conscience.
Globalize the intifada.
Similarly, marches in Washington, D.C. linking the Black Lives Matter movement to the Palestinian cause, prompting the Republican Jewish coalition to demand that presidential hopeful Joe Biden condemn these anti-Semitic chants. Pro-Israel groups on social media are spooked, posting this picture of a blown-up public bus in response to these calls for an intifada in America, saying they hope Americans won't also have to fear using public transportation. One of many targets used by terrorists in Israel during the first and second intifadas, or Palestinian uprisings. These were marked by indiscriminate attacks against the Israeli public, including suicide bombings, not only on transport, but also in popular nightclubs, eateries, and more, killing and injuring thousands, mostly civilians. Meanwhile, locally, Palestinian Authority officials are threatening a third intifada if Israel goes ahead with its plans to annex Jewish settlements in Judea and Samaria. The PA president's advisor, Nabil Shath, telling Arabic French media that Hamas in Gaza and Fatah in the West Bank will combine forces during such a scenario. This coming less than a week after Israeli plans to begin the process of extending sovereignty in the area fell through. The plan, conjured under the auspices of the United States' Peace to Prosperity outline.
Well, Israel's Defense Minister Benny Gantz is responding to a series of mysterious blasts in Iran, saying that not everything that happens there is connected to Israel. At least 2 of 3 incidents linked by explosions have taken place at secretive nuclear and weapons facilities. Aaron Porras has the details.
Thick black smoke billowing up from the Iranian Zargan power plant, catching fire after a reported explosion near Ahvaz. This, one of the latest in a series of mysterious blasts that Iranian officials are blaming on Israeli cyber attacks. It comes just a few hours before a chlorine gas leak sprung open at the Karun Petrochemical Center, causing 70 workers to fall ill. One after the other, these Saturday incidents following fires at the Natanz uranium enrichment facility on Thursday. Photos of the damages showing a completely demolished laboratory being used for the development of advanced uranium enrichment centrifuges. The Natanz explosion is the second massive blast at a secretive installation in as many weeks, the first being at a missile complex in Kojir on June 25. Iran has produced no direct evidence of Israel's involvement in these incidents, and no casualties have been reported on the Zargan plant, which is now back to business as usual. But as Iran looks into the possibility that both Israel and the U.S. are behind the attack on the uranium lab, the Islamic Republic is saying that it will respond should their suspicions prove true. Israeli officials, for their part, are ignoring the accusations publicly. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as per Israeli policy, not commenting on the charges. But Israeli authorities are reportedly bracing for potential Iranian retaliation. Former head of IDF military intelligence, Amos Yadlin, tweeting that there must be operational readiness for a response, be it in the form of a cyber attack, missile fire from Syria, or something overseas. And the fate of the already faltering 2015 Iran nuclear deal once again hanging in the balance. Iran dialing up the pressures on the European signatories, accusing Britain, France, and Germany of failing to uphold their side of the accord, sending a vague letter to the coordinator of the JCPOA pact, signaling an unspecified dispute. The letter triggers a month-long period in which all parties will need to resolve this dispute. But should that fail, this could spell the end of the nuclear pact, designed to limit Tehran's nuclear capabilities. The pact has long been on its last legs since United States President Trump pulled America out of the agreement in 2018 and reintroduced economic sanctions.
And joining me with more is Iran expert Dr. Ori Goldberg from the IDC. Dr. Goldberg, a pleasure to have you with us. Now, Israel has a policy, as we know, of not commenting on accusations of attacks in Iran and even in Syria. How significant, though, is this latest string of suspicious incidents in Iran?
It may be significant factually regarding the situation on the ground, but it's probably more important in terms of what each side chooses to make of it. This is grist for the mill for the mutual hostilities between Israel and Iran.
Now, talk us through then the letter that's been sent to the EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, and what this actually could mean for Israel.
The meaning is that the Iranians are still sticking by the nuclear agreement. They still want to discuss potential conflicts through the mechanisms that the agreement establishes. That's good news, I think, for regional peace. It may be a little less good for Israel, who sticks to a hostile policy with regard to Iran.
But in terms of the substance, what in fact is Iran accusing the European signatories of doing or not doing?
Well, we don't actually know yet. We know that it will accuse the European signatories of not living up to their end of the agreement, but details have yet to be released regarding the specific violation the Iranians are claiming.
So then what would Israel do? What can Israel do, for example, if this falls through in a month and the nuclear deal is voided?
I actually doubt the nuclear deal will be voided, but even if it does, this isn't Israel's party. Israel will probably continue to do what it has done. It may consider itself politically triumphant, but that remains to be seen, particularly with, all eyes being on the American election in November.
And now, Ori, though, COVID-19, as we know, has dominated the discussion when it comes to defence. But could the pandemic's influence on the ground see tensions or lack thereof be coming to an end?
Well, what COVID-19 is doing is actually limiting both sides' ability to focus their attention on escalation. Both sides have much bigger fish to fry at the moment. This could, potentially, there could be a scenario where this spins out of control. I have to say, on both sides, I think there's a reluctance to ramp it up. There's a real will to settle down for the long run and try to get things together on the home front.
Wow, well, it would be incredible to see if COVID-19 can in fact bring some peace between these warring parties. Thank you for that insight, Dr. Goldberg.
My pleasure.
Well, now it's a perfect time to take a detour here and talk about cats. Perfect, get it? Anybody who's been to Jerusalem knows that street cats are everywhere. Also here in Tel Aviv, but did you know there's a reason for it? And to tell us more, I'm joined by zoologist and animal trainer Ellie Newman. Ellie, a pleasure to have you back with us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Of course. Now, we know that Israel as a whole has an estimated population of some 2 million street cats, but there's actually a reason for keeping them as stray cats on the streets. Tell us why.
Yeah, you're right. Israel actually has one of the highest populations of human to cat ratios on the streets. And they
what a statistic.
Great one to have, but it's the first thing that people notice when they visit the country. It's how many cats they are. And we think that they were introduced in the 30s to keep the rats and the snakes and the mice away. And it's actually working. A lot of the municipalities and areas around the country want to keep a certain number of cats just to keep them going like this. So they have a lot of programs where they take the street cats, spay or neuter them and put them back. And you might notice them having a notch on their ear. That means they've been neutered and put back onto the streets to have their place there.
And also we know that there are a lot of people that are looking to look after these cats.
Yeah.
They're putting food out for them and some treats for them, but there are many of them that really don't look healthy. So what are the best ways to be looking after these street cats?
Well, that is a bit of a hard one. I mean, everyone knows the cat ladies of their streets. There's cat ladies everywhere that every day will come out and feed the cats. But we have to remember they are not a wild animal. They are still domesticated, and often they don't do too well on the streets. Sometimes you see them malnourished or diseases, and without that human care, human intervention, it doesn't look too good. So if people are worried about cats, contact their local council, contact their local vets, because there are programs and money in place to be able to care for these street cats.
And it turns out that cats are actually really smart. And if you do have a pet cat, you can train them to do more things than we would expect. So tell us about some of these things.
Absolutely. People often think that you can only train your dogs, but you can do a lot of training with cats. And cats, just like most animals, are motivated often by food or toys or play. So you need to just find what motivates your cat and really use that to train them to do any behaviours that you like, whether it's to mentally enrich them, whether it's to help them go to the vets, jump in a pet carrier, or just simple games that they love to play with you. Training pretty much the same way you train a dog, using positive reinforcement.
And I understand that you can train them even to brush their teeth.
That's it. We can train animals to help us look after them. So things that you in the past would have to hold an animal down to do, we can actually train them to doing positive reinforcement. So train the cat to open their mouth, accept their toothbrush and care their teeth so they don't need to go to the vet as often.
And in terms of one big cat family, I understand that even training the bigger cats like cheetahs and lions can be done the same way. Tell us what's being done in a Jerusalem zoo.
Yes, well, zoos are leading the way in not only conservation but in also animal care. Obviously, you've got a big cat like a cheetah or a lion and a tiger, and you can't force them to do something that they don't want to. So we find what motivates them. The staff here at the Jerusalem Zoo are doing a great job. They've trained their big cats to lie down, accept injections, whether it's for vaccinations, open their mouth to do health checks, and that makes the life and welfare better for these big cats, but also really helps the staff looking after them and also veterinary care. So it really is using reinforcement all the way, and you get some amazing behaviours, as you can see here.
And to see that their little brothers and sisters are living on our streets and they need our care too. Thank you so much for that insight, Ellie.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Now, as the weather heats up in Israel, more locals are looking to entertain guests, sitting outdoors and enjoying the sunshine. Now, summertime in Israel always feels like a celebration. As it's known, Israelis love any excuse to let their hair down. And oftentimes that will involve a bottle of wine or two. And joining me in the studio today is Roy Harel from Israel's most famous and oldest family winery, Teperberg. Roy, such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Now, Teperberg has a celebration of its own this year. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, this year we are celebrating 150 years anniversary of the winery. Well, first generation, Abraham Teperberg was born in Odessa, then he fled to Austria, and at around 1820, he made a really brave decision to make Aliyah to Israel and to establish the first winery within the old city of Jerusalem.
Unbelievable.
And this year we're having like a huge celebration with a 150 years anniversary.
What a milestone. 5 generations of winemakers, and I understand you're about to open one before I even asked for it, that you're marking it by the creation of a special wine to mark the 150 years. Tell me a bit about what this is.
Yeah, we decided to create 4 new bottles of wine for the 150 years. So at the moment, I'm uncorking a white blend in the Inspire series.
Okay.
It's a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Viognier.
Beautiful. White wine, perfect for the summer.
Yeah, it's so hot. So
how did you decide to use this particular blend to mark the special occasion?
Well, we had a sit down like around 4 years ago regarding the 150 years, because you know, wine, it's a long process to develop new products. We negotiated where we want to achieve, where we're gonna go with the 150 years, and we wanted.
Thank you very much.
Whites that are really crisp, mineral, very aromatic, and they represent our terroir.
It smells delicious. Terroir meaning the combination between the climate, the soil, the topography,
temperature.
And also Teperberg, I understand, has some 10 locations where you grow your grapes around the country. So you're able to perfectly match the grape with the terroir.
Yeah. So here we have the Sauvignon Blanc that comes from the Upper Galilee, and we have the Viognier that comes from the low parts of Judean hills, and the combination is just
beautiful. Well, I think I've been holding this wine way too long. I would love to have a taste. Let's have a l'chaim.
L'chaim.
L'chaim, thank you so much. This is the first time I've drunk on the job. That is beautiful. Yeah. Unbelievable.
So it's really high acidity, minerality.
Right.
It's very aromatic. It's very complementing to Mediterranean food style.
Certainly, it's delicate, so I suppose it's great for the Israeli palate, American palate. I know coming from Australia, the wines are have much fuller bodies, perhaps. I'm not quite sure if you would describe this as...
It depends on the wine philosophy of the winemaker and on the terroir, of course. But our chief winemaker philosophy is really to create wines that are more delicate and more subtle.
So as we move into the summer months, it's getting hotter and hotter. What kind of wines would you recommend we're pairing with our meals or using to entertain our friends?
I love rosé, like really dry rosé, high minerality, high acidity, that goes well with the Mediterranean food.
Well, of course, if anybody wants to know a little bit more about Teperberg Winery and the beautiful journey and the adventure, we'll be showing a feature piece to our audience next week. So, of course, they'll tune in to be watching that. And, of course, another l'chaim to you to say thank you very much and congratulations for 150 years.
Thank you for everything. It was a pleasure.
Well, there you go. And on that beautiful and delicious note, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Keep the windows open for a breeze tonight because it should be clear to partly cloudy overhead with an average low of 73 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow we can expect mostly sunny skies and highs of about 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. So remember to stay hydrated. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. All right, it seems this little dog is certainly feeling the heat of summer, taking the fan away from his owners and putting it on its cage. Very smart indeed. There you go. All right, well, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.44 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Tracy Alexander and thank you so much for watching.